how SAGE document called for increase in perceived threat of COVID using hard-hitting emotional messages. Now, this story is interesting on two levels. One, this SAGE, which is the organization, the group, very much impacted by psychologists, is the scientific advisory group to the government. So when the UK government says we're following the science, what they're actually saying is we're doing what SAGE says we should do, and there's no one in SAGE that's ever seen a ballot box. And I'll just read what this article says. A document presented to SAGE called for an increase in the perceived threat of COVID using hard-hitting emotional messages. Reports claim today, well, they're not claiming, the document exists. I've quoted from it. Psychologists have accused Downing Street of using covert psychological strategies, which it said in this document. A substantial number of people still do not feel sufficiently personally threatened. It could be that they are reassured by the low death rate in their demographic group, although levels of concern may be rising. The perceived threat, or the perceived level of personal threat, needs to be increased among those who are complacent. In other words, we must frighten the crap out of them. Using hard-hitting emotional messaging. And to be effective, this must also empower people by making clear the actions they can take to reduce the threat. In other words, we frighten you to death and we tell you what you can do to assuage that fear by doing what we tell you. The document allegedly gave 14 options for improving compliance, including use media to increase sense of personal threat, which they said would be highly effective. And it also talks about the fact that they basically need to play the compliant against the non-compliant. Divided rule. And it says that the SPI-B, this is the short term for this scientific pandemic influenza group, SPI-B are often not challenged because many of those involved are not very equipped to evaluate it. Well, again, you know, these SAGE people are supposed to be scientists, and they're not equipped to evaluate a document that is recommending a course of action in which you frighten the crap out of people so they'll do what you say. Nonsense. What this SPI-B document is articulating is the cult agenda. To use fear to get what it wants. And it's still going on. It was already perceived by Albert Einstein, we've got another mention today, who reputedly said the world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. Which is exactly, in vast numbers of cases, what has happened since the turn of 2020. To look on, Julian says, and do nothing except tremble, is what is leading this sickness called COVID to manifest. It is a cellular expression of a lack of resistance to lies and a lack of appetite for truth. In an initiation by fire to live by a different set of standards or values than those that have led to the crisis humanity finds itself in today. The great majority of those at the receiving end of this great global lie called a pandemic cannot distinguish fiction from fact, phantom from reality. The deliberate introduction of chaos and confusion is carefully mingled with earnest sounding political calls to be responsible, get yourself vaccinated.